and that is very difficult for them to grapple with. We can only hope that they're able to find the strength and ability to sustain everything that they're going through.
And that is very difficult for them to grapple with. We can only hope that they're able to find the strength and ability to sustain everything that they're going through. When the shocking news broke that Nick Reiner had been taken into custody for allegedly taking the lives of his own parents, the entire public froze in disbelief. People waited for a confession, but Nick stayed eerily calm, denying every accusation without a flicker of emotion. His stare was blank, cold, like he didn't even recognize the name written on the case file in front of him. 2 weeks later, inside a freezing interrogation room, everything changed. The moment investigators placed those haunting crime scene photos before him, Nick suddenly shattered. His wailing filled the air, the kind of cry that sounded like something deep inside had finally broken. And from that point on, an unsettling truth started to unravel. A truth buried under years of silence, resentment, and pain that no one had dared to face. Because this tragedy didn't just happen one night. It had been building for years.
You mentioned the DA indicated the death penalty is on the table potentially. Do you think prosecutors will ultimately pursue the death penalty?
I don't think that they will, and I hope that this doesn't air again if I'm wrong. The reason why I say that is because we're dealing with an individual that clearly has a long history of mental health issues.
Ever since Nick was a lonely child, feeling forgotten inside his own home, the cracks were already forming. As he grew older, those feelings twisted into something darker. He spiraled into addiction, drifting from one state to another, lost in jealousy and rage toward his own family, especially the ones who seemed to have it all together. When Nick finally came back home, he wasn't returning as a son. He was returning as a stranger with a storm inside him. And that storm turned destructive in the most devastating way. In one moment of madness, he ended everything with a familiar kitchen knife. The same one that once helped prepare family dinners filled with laughter. Later, when Nick spoke, his words chilled everyone in the room. "I've never regretted it. They deserved it." That sentence hit harder than any judge's verdict, and it left behind a haunting question. What truly destroyed this family? The blade in his hand or the emotional wounds that had been left untreated for an entire lifetime? 2 weeks after his arrest, Nick Reiner found himself sitting in a cold, cramped interrogation room. As you mentioned, the DA indicated the death penalty is on the table potentially. Do you think prosecutors will ultimately pursue the death penalty? I don't think that they will. And I hope that this doesn't air again if I'm wrong. The reason why I say that is because we're dealing with an individual that clearly has a long history of mental health issues. Fluorescent lights buzzing above him, throwing harsh reflections across a scratched metal table. The room felt heavy, almost suffocating. Nick sat hunched forward, shoulders drooping as if the weight of that old family house had settled right onto his back. His hands shook as he locked them together, knuckles pale and stiff. The anger was gone. The defiance that had once marked. His face was gone too. All that remained was an eerie stillness, eyes wide open, but hollow, as if no spark of life remained behind them. Then, as investigators waited, the silence stretched until it became unbearable. What Nick finally said next would twist the entire story upside down, changing how everyone saw the case and leading to what people now call the shocking revelation of Nick Reiner. After hours of silence, Nick's throat cracked as he finally spoke. He let out this strange little laugh. Soft, misplaced, almost chilling. "I know what you're waiting for," he said in a shaky voice. "But I'm not sure I remember everything clearly anymore." He didn't look at anyone, his eyes fixed straight on the blank wall ahead, like he was staring at the ghosts of his own memories. What followed wasn't a clean confession. It came in broken pieces. Every word fell heavy, like glass shattering across that cold metal table. "That day, my head was so loud," Nick whispered, his voice trembling. It was like hundreds of voices screaming at once. "I just wanted it all to stop." Then he began talking. About his childhood, about the quiet distance between him and his father, Rob Reiner. It wasn't born from fights or shouting matches. It was something much colder, something that grew in silence, drug abuse, and so forth. In fact, his father even made a film based on it. So, I think when you take that into the equation, it's not generally the case that fits into a special circumstances murder, a death penalty case, Because the whole point of the death penalty is to send a message to someone who knows better, who has full control over their faculties. I don't think that's the situation we have here. Night after night, Nick would sit nearby, while the rest of his family laughed together so effortlessly. They laughed so naturally, he said softly. And I was just there wondering when I was supposed to laugh too. From the outside, Rob looked like the perfect father. Devoted, patient, successful. He was there at the big moments, creating memories that looked golden to everyone else. But inside that house, Nick felt like an outsider. His siblings shared tight bonds with their dad through movies, sports, and easy conversations while he watched from the sidelines, unable to find his way in. That house was safe, Nick said. But I didn't know how to step inside. The door was always open. But I didn't have the key. His words filled the room with an ache no one could ignore. Nick described his father as emotionally distant. Not cold, but unreachable. Rob tried, but his packed work schedule and the overwhelming legacy of the Reiner family loomed large. Carl Reiner's name carried immense weight, and Nick felt crushed beneath that shadow every single day. "I'm a defective copy," Nick blurted then. Paused, looking instantly regretful. "I repeat, but I don't create, just a shadow of shadows." That loneliness didn't fade. It grew stronger through his teenage years. Nick withdrew, retreating further into himself until the only peace he found was outside his own home. He searched for belonging in places that didn't care about family names or expectations. "Out there, nobody asked whose son I was," he said quietly. "It was enough that I existed." But that emptiness didn't stay empty for long. In those quiet corners, he found something that offered escape. Drugs. What started as a way to quiet his thoughts soon became his prison. By age 15, Nick's life was spiraling fast, and his parents sent him to rehab. He remembered that moment vividly, a turning point he couldn't erase. His family didn't hide it. They didn't pretend nothing was wrong. They pulled him out again and again, refusing to abandon him no matter how bad things got. "They didn't leave me," Nick said, his eyes locked on the cold tabletop, his voice barely a whisper. "They didn't abandon me." And yet somehow, despite all those chances, that deep emptiness inside him never went away. "But I kept abandoning myself." That's how Nick described it. His voice hollow, almost detached. The deeper his addiction got, the stronger the substances became. And every time he got clean, it felt like waking up in a room more wrecked than before. His path through rehab wasn't a straight line. It was a painful loop of progress, hope, and relapse. Each time he managed to stand, his family dared to believe it was finally the turning point. But every fall after that hit harder than the last. "I could see their disappointment," Nick murmured. Even when they didn't say a word, the pressure to be a version of himself worthy of the Reiner name, worthy of Rob, ate away at him piece by piece until he was just existing, stuck on repeat, watching days blur together like a scratched record. Then came the lost years. Nick drifted through the country like a ghost. Maine, New Jersey, Texas, just names of places where he tried and failed to outrun himself. Cold bus rides, nights on floors instead of beds, no real tomorrow. Each sunrise didn't feel like a new start, just another question. How do I survive one more day? Still, Rob and Michelle Reiner never gave up on him. They didn't turn away. Not once. Even when the phone calls went unanswered, they kept calling. Even when texts disappeared into silence, they kept sending them. They didn't pretend the problem didn't exist. They talked about it openly with heartbreaking honesty and love, believing that as long as they could still name the pain, hope wasn't completely gone. They spent everything, time, money, energy, chasing small windows of light that always seemed to close too soon. There were nights when Nick would call home, voice shaking on the edge of breaking. Michelle would listen quietly, her tone tired but never harsh. Rob would ask the same two questions, his voice trembling behind forced calm. "Where are you? Are you safe?" Sometimes Nick would stay silent for a long moment before saying something that broke his parents' hearts. "You don't have to worry anymore. I can't be fixed." Rob's response never changed. Soft, steady, almost pleading. "I don't need you to be fixed," he'd say. "I just need you to still be here." Then something shifted. Rob decided to stop trying to save Nick and started trying to stand beside him. Their collaboration on Being Charlie in 2015 wasn't a miracle. It was a fragile bridge built out of shared pain. They faced the subject of addiction head-on. No sugarcoating, no pretending. For the first time in years, Nick had rhythm, work, a schedule, a reason to get out of bed. There were quiet nights when they sat together, too tired to talk. Rob kept his eyes on the script, saying softly, "I don't fully understand you, but I want to be here." Nick couldn't find the words to respond. His throat tightened because he didn't know how to show his father the chaos inside his head. And yet, for a while, it worked. Nick was stable, focused. People close to the family started whispering that maybe, just maybe, he had turned a corner. The Reiners began to hope again cautiously, like even breathing too loudly might make it all disappear. For once, Nick stood in the light, no longer completely lost under the shadow of Rob and Carl Reiner's legendary names. But the peace didn't last. Addiction crept back in like a familiar storm. The relapse wasn't loud. It was slow, quiet, cruel. He started avoiding his family again. The calls stopped. The old instability returned, fiercer than before. Each time it happened, trust cracked a little more. Even though love never faded. The hardest truth wasn't that they didn't try. It was that they tried until there was nothing left to give. Rob gave everything a father could. Nick tried to climb out, but every step forward came with a heavier fall. Love was there, deep, real, but it just couldn't fill the endless emptiness between them. Then came the summer of 2025. 6 months before everything fell apart, Nick returned to his parents' home, not as someone coming home, but as someone who had run out of exits. "I just need some time," he said, his voice worn out. "I just need things to be quiet for a bit." He moved through the days aimlessly. No steady job, no plan, just trying to keep himself from collapsing again. But calm never came. From the first weeks, his relapses hit faster, harder, unpredictable. The patterns that Rob and Michelle had learned to manage no longer applied. Nights were sleepless. Michelle stayed awake, listening for any sound. Rob forced himself to follow a routine, though his eyes betrayed the truth. He was terrified. Nick could feel that fear. Even if he didn't admit it, it was everywhere. He became tense, irritated, quick to snap. "You're always looking at me like something's about to happen," he shouted. One night, Rob paused before answering quietly. "Because I'm afraid." Those words didn't calm anything. They only made Nick turn away, jaw tight, face unreadable. The love was still there, but it had changed shape. It was love mixed with fear. Not just fear for Nick's life, but fear for everyone under that roof. The emotional distance between father and son, the gap that had haunted them for years, stood wide open again. There were no explosions, no screaming matches, just conversations that faded mid-sentence. Nick wanted to be understood, but he didn't know how to explain his pain. Rob wanted to protect him, but he didn't know where to draw the line. Their bond was filled with love, guilt, and exhaustion. Hope kept clashing with heartbreak, and all their years of trying still couldn't bridge the gap. They loved each other fiercely, but sometimes love alone isn't enough to save what's already slipping away. There were days when Nick tried hard to act like everything was normal. He'd wake up late, sit down with his mother for breakfast, and talk about finding a job. "I'm thinking about starting over," he'd say softly, almost as if he was trying to convince himself more than anyone else. Michelle would just nod, afraid that asking even one question too deeply might make the whole fragile calm collapse. But soon the sleepless nights crept back. The air in the house grew heavy again, and those promises of starting over began to sound empty, just echoes of hope that never arrived. Rob tried to step in carefully, balancing between love and boundaries. "You have to tell me if you're not okay," he said one evening, voice firm but gentle. "I can't keep guessing forever." Nick let out a hollow laugh. "You think I even know when I'm okay?" His words hung in the air like a confession neither of them wanted to hear. Every attempt to control the situation only stretched the tension tighter, like a frayed rope ready to snap. By the time the holidays came around, that tension was no longer a surprise. It had been building for years. Addiction, recovery, relapse, reconciliation, disappointment, over and over again. Then came December 13th, 2025. The night of Conan O'Brien's Christmas party, a night that would change everything. Nick hadn't planned to go, but home had become unbearable. The walls felt too close, the silence too loud. "At least there'll be people there," he later recalled saying, his voice dry and cracked. He followed his parents to the party. Not exactly invited, but not left behind either. It was easier to take him along than to leave him alone. The moment he stepped inside, Nick felt it. That invisible wall between him and everyone else. Laughter filled the rooms. Music played softly. People hugged and swapped stories. But Nick stood apart, holding a drink he barely touched, his eyes darting from face to face, desperate for something that would make him feel like he belonged. At one point, he turned to a stranger and blurted out, "Are you famous?" The man laughed awkwardly, and Nick laughed, too, but the smile on his face didn't reach his eyes. He could feel Rob watching him from across the room. His father's gaze felt like pressure between his shoulder blades. Nick tried to blend in, talking more, moving from group to group, inserting himself into conversations that didn't need him. But inside, his mind was spinning. Everything was too loud, too bright. When Rob finally pulled him aside, Nick forced a grin. "I'm fine," he said quickly. "Don't make a big deal out of it." Rob looked at him for a long moment, his jaw tight. "I'm not sure," he replied quietly. That small exchange was the spark. The argument didn't explode right away. It simmered, building through half-sentences, sharp glances, and the kind of silence that cuts deeper than shouting. Nick felt cornered, even though no one was physically stopping him. "You're always looking at me like I'm about to do something terrible," he whispered, voice trembling with bitterness. Rob sighed, exhausted. "Because I don't want that to happen." To Nick, that sentence hit like a knife. It wasn't loud, but it cut deep. People nearby started noticing the tension. Conversations faltered, heads turned. That made Nick feel even more out of place, like every eye in the room was silently confirming what he already believed, that he didn't belong. "I shouldn't be here," he muttered, half apology, half accusation. Rob didn't respond. He just looked at his son, helpless. In that moment, the distance between them felt wider than ever. Nick left the party soon after. No one asked him to go, but no one stopped him either. He stepped outside into the freezing night, gasping for air, trembling without realizing it. His father's words echoed in his mind, overlapping until they no longer made sense. He didn't remember exactly where he went afterward. Just the hollow feeling of being alone in a crowd. Later, Nick said it wasn't about that single night. It was about years of exhaustion, fear, and confusion finally spilling over. "The party was just where it all showed," he said quietly. "No one did anything wrong. Everyone was just tired." In his memory, the last thing he saw was his parents leaving the party, faces tense, but trying to appear calm. He wanted to call out to them to say something that might undo the years of silence. But the words never came. They'd been buried too long under disappointment and guilt. He turned away, feeling something irreversible had just happened, even if no one could name it yet. That night marked the point of no return. And when Nick later spoke about it, he said it was as if the tragedy had already been waiting, sitting in the background, patient and inevitable. When he returned home, the anger didn't explode right away. It settled, heavy and cold, like frost spreading through his chest. The house was silent, too silent. He stood in the living room for a long time, listening to his heartbeat, surrounded by family photos and his father's awards. "I'm still here," he thought, "but no one's really here with me." Nick said everything that followed came in a blur, like his mind had split in two. He couldn't control the noise inside his head. The thoughts looped endlessly, distorted and cruel. "If the pain won't disappear," he whispered, "then I'll make it stop." "I didn't want to hurt anyone," Nick said later. "I just wanted it all to end." But that desire twisted into something far darker, something that couldn't be undone. He walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, but couldn't eat. The air felt thick, unreal. His eyes wandered to the photos on the wall. His smiling family, his father's awards, reminders of everything he thought he'd never be. "I'm so lonely," he muttered. "I'm nothing at all, as tears ran down his face. The anger from earlier mixed with years of buried pain. It all collided inside him. Grief, jealousy, shame, exhaustion. And as he stood there trembling, one final thought consumed him. That maybe this was the night everything would finally stop spinning. Nick stood frozen in the kitchen, his hand gripping the same large knife his mother used to carve Sunday roasts. "Just one more talk," he whispered to himself. "If only they could understand me." But before the thought could even settle, his feet were already carrying him upstairs. He reached the master bedroom where his parents slept peacefully. Michelle turned to the side, Rob on his back, breathing evenly. For a moment, time stopped. Nick stood in the doorway, trembling, his mind racing. "I'm sorry. I don't want this," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. But then something inside him snapped, a burst of chaos that no one could stop. He lunged forward. Rob woke up in confusion, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Nick, what are you doing?" he gasped. That question broke Nick completely. He started sobbing even as his trembling hand refused to stop. Michelle woke up and screamed, "Nick, stop my son!" Her voice pierced through the air, desperate and terrified. It was the sound that would haunt him forever. Moments later, silence fell. Both of his parents lay still, the room frozen in unbearable quiet. Nick dropped to the floor, hands shaking, staring at what he had done. "Dad, Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't want this," he repeated over and over, clutching his head, rocking back and forth like a child lost in a nightmare. He ran out of the house, driving aimlessly through the city, ending up at a seaside hotel as if distance could silence the screams echoing in his head. But the images didn't fade. They followed him, relentless, merciless, until the guilt became suffocating. "I just wanted everything to stop," he said later. "But now it's worse than ever." He described that moment of realization as a collapse. Time slowing down, then crashing into him all at once. He called their names, even though he knew there would be no answer. "I'm sorry," he whispered again and again, not even knowing who he was talking to. The regret didn't come like a wave. It came like a crushing weight pressing down on his chest until he could barely breathe. In panic and disbelief, Nick left the house again. He had no plan, no direction, only the overwhelming certainty that he couldn't face what he had done. He drove toward the coast, booked a cheap hotel in Santa Monica, and sat alone, staring at nothing. Staff members later said he looked calm, even. Polite, not trembling or erratic, just empty. When police pieced everything together, they discovered the truth. There had been no break-in, no strangers, no forced entry. The only person unaccounted for that night was Nick. The tragedy had unfolded quietly, all within the walls of the Reiner home. The following afternoon, Rob and Michelle's daughter, Rami, who lived just across the street, felt uneasy when she couldn't reach her parents. She decided to walk over and check. The moment she stepped through the door, she felt something was terribly wrong. She called emergency services immediately. Within minutes, paramedics and LAPD officers filled the house, but it was already too late. The scene was devastating. The couple was found unconscious in their bedroom, and the home was sealed off for investigation. Forensic experts confirmed there were multiple close-range wounds, signs of a direct confrontation. It wasn't an attack from afar. It was personal, up close. But what truly disturbed investigators wasn't just the nature of the wounds. It was their number. The act hadn't ended in a single moment of rage. It was prolonged, repeated like a mind that refused to stop even after reason was gone. Within 24 hours, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office charged Nick Reiner with 2 counts of first-degree homicide. One for his father, one for his mother. Prosecutors added special circumstances due to multiple victims, making this one of the most severe legal charges possible under California law. That meant if convicted, Nick could face life imprisonment without parole or even the state's highest penalty, depending on the court's final judgment. Officials made it clear. The forensic evidence spoke for itself, and they believed it met every legal standard for intent. The story that had begun as a quiet family tragedy now exploded into one of Los Angeles' most closely watched cases in years. Every new detail revealed another layer of heartbreak. A collapse of love, trust, and mental stability that no one saw coming. On December 17, 2025, Nick made his first court appearance in Los Angeles. Until then, the public had only fragments of the story. Brief press updates, vague statements, endless speculation. But now, everything was stepping into the light. The courtroom was silent, tightly controlled. No cameras, no media circus. Only a few reporters, lawyers, and court officials were allowed inside. When Nick entered, wearing a protective anti-violence vest, the room fell completely still. It was a sight few would forget, an image of someone whose life had shattered beyond repair. No one mentioned the vest. Not the judge, not the attorneys. It was as though everyone collectively decided not to acknowledge it. The proceedings began, every word echoing sharply through the quiet room. The charges were: read aloud, slow and deliberate. 2 counts of first-degree homicide. When the judge asked if he understood his rights, Nick simply nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." It was the only thing he said. He didn't plead, didn't argue, didn't react. He just sat there, his face blank, his mind somewhere else entirely. His defense attorney, Alan Jackson, known for handling high-profile cases, requested more time to prepare before entering a formal plea. The judge agreed, setting the next hearing for January 7, 2026. The prosecution didn't object. Everything was procedural, quiet, almost eerily calm. When it was over, Nick was escorted out in silence, the same way he had entered. No eye contact, no words, just quiet footsteps fading down the corridor. In the days that followed, the Reiner family withdrew completely from the public eye. A private memorial was held for Rob and Michelle. No cameras, no speeches, just love and mourning. Friends, family, and a few of Rob's longtime colleagues gathered to remember them, not as Hollywood icons, but as people, parents, partners, friends. Those who attended said the service was painfully beautiful. No one talked about fame, success, or awards. They talked about laughter at dinner tables, long walks, quiet kindness. It was a farewell rooted in love, stripped of everything else. As for Nick, his confession didn't bring peace. It only deepened the ache. He didn't try to justify himself, didn't claim madness or manipulation. He just faced the truth, broken, remorseful, and fully aware that there was no way to undo what he had done. His real punishment began long before any court sentence. It lived in his mind, a sentence that no prison could ever match. And now, with the next hearing approaching, the question that grips everyone remains. What will happen next? Will the court see Nick as a calculated monster or as a lost soul crushed under addiction, guilt, and expectations too heavy to bear? Let us know your thoughts below. Every perspective matters. What do you think justice looks like in a case this heartbreaking? Thank you for watching until the very end. If you want to follow this story as it unfolds and explore more deep emotional stories like this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next one.